Welcome to the next module of Mastering Next.js, where we're going to be talking about running locally. Before we jump into this module, I just want to mention there's a few prereqs that you may or may not have already done to run your application locally. The first one is you're going to need Node.js installed on your system. If you've ever ran a React application before, you probably already have this set up. I figured I would just mention this. And secondly, you're going to need a package manager. There's really two popular ones, NPM and Yarn. For this course, I'm going to be using Yarn, but you can use either one. So install Yarn if you don't have it, or use NPM, but you will need Node as well as Yarn before you can run these applications locally. We're going to talk about installing, running locally, and then dive into linting and formatting as well. So let's jump into a really quick example. So if you run npx create next app, that's going to create a really simple hello world type next application that we talked about in the introduction module. And I have that code up here on the right. So to run the application locally, you'll see we have a few different scripts. We have yarn dev, which is running it locally, yarn build, which builds the application for production, and then yarn start, which is going to start the production version of the application. So if we do yarn dev inside of the directory of the application that we created, you'll see it's available on port 3000. So I can go over to my browser, pull up port 3000, and we see our application. It's that easy to get started running locally. There's no extra hoops to jump through. It's really, really nice. Now, I want to also touch on the other scripts that are available here, building and then starting your production server. So if I kill my server, which I'm doing Control C here to kill that, and I do yarn build, which runs next build under the scenes, you're going to see it's creating this optimized production build. Now, later in the course, I'm going to talk about static pre-rendering, but you'll see it talks about them just a little bit here, where the only route in this application, which is index, you'll see it has this circle right here, which is saying this is a static HTML page, and it gives you a rundown of what's being outputted in the production minified, compressed files. So if I were to have other files in here that they used get initial props or get server props or some of these other new things we're going to be talking about later in the course, you'll see that there would be different symbols here as we create this production build. So now that I have this production build, I can do yarn start. And this is going to, instead of running the dev server, it's going to run the production build locally. So it's going to look the same, right? But I figured I'd show this example because you're going to want to know how to do that. And when you deploy your applications later on in the course, you're going to be deploying the production version of your application. So getting up and running locally, not too bad. The next thing I want to talk about is linting and formatting. So let's go back over here. Let's start with linting. So the linter we're going to be using and talking about is called ESLint. And really the point of a linter is it helps you catch bugs. You find problems, there's a static analysis that runs on your code, and it just allows you to fix them automatically, and it gives you this consistent coding style. So across all of your projects or across your team, you can ensure that, okay, these specific rules that I care about, I want to enforce them across our code base in a repeatable way. And this is really great for not only your own projects, ensuring that you're doing things correctly, but for organizations or larger teams to ensure that you're kind of all on the same page. And the ESLint configuration that I use is one that one of my coworkers created. And the reason I like it is because it includes a lot of things for free that I don't have to configure and set up. So ensuring that accessibility is set up right, that jest is right, that I'm using React hooks correctly, that there's no security vulnerabilities, all of these things, it's already been configured in this way Now, I will say that this isn't everyone's cup of tea. A lot of people don't like having to roll their own configurations, and I'm going to touch on another option for that here in a second. But for ESLint, if we go over to our code, you configure ESLint using a ESLint RC file. So in this module, we're saying which configuration we want to use, and then specifically if we want to modify any of the rules that are included in the default configuration, we can do that here. So you'll see that there were a few that I decided to turn off for this mastering Next.js repo. There's also an ignore file that you can specify which files or folders you don't want your linter to run over. The next thing I want to talk about is formatting code. So we have a linter which helps us catch problems, and then we have a formatter which makes our code easier to read. The one we're going to be talking about today is called Prettier. And Prettier, I think the biggest thing for me is that you can automatically format code on save. And I can show you an example. If I go in my VS Code settings, there is a format on save option, and this is really nice. For example, if I go into this index here and I do something crazy where I put a bunch of weird tabs in here and I hit save, it will just automatically format it back for me, which saves me a lot of time, and I don't have to worry about getting things perfectly set up in the way that I want it. Another great thing about a formatter is that it saves you conversations on code reviews about style issues. So you might have seen cases where one programmer will say, well, why aren't you using tabs here, or why aren't you using semicolons or XYZ? And having a standardized way of doing your code formatting and linting will prevent some of these comments and conversations that you're going to have on code reviews, and ultimately save you a little bit of time and energy. And you can even bake this into a Git pre-commit hook using a tool like Husky. So you'll see I have this pre-commit hook, which is saying before my code gets committed to Git, I want to run this lint staged. And for lint staged in this repo, I'm going to format all the code, and then I'm going to add the files. I'm also doing some image optimization here, but this is completely optional. But really, it just allows you to, you don't even have to worry about it on save if you didn't want to, but you can make sure that once your code gets pushed up, it's going to be in the correct format. So this is the approach that I like to use, but another approach that I'm seeing a lot of people trend towards is it's kind of the same thing as Next.js. What if I don't want to worry about that? And what if I want more of a zero config approach? And that's where standardjs comes in. So standardjs, you don't have to have any of the configuration files. You don't have to have your Prettier files or your ESLint RC files. It just works. It takes care of giving you some sane defaults for what linting rules you want, for how the code should be formatted, and it gives you kind of all the benefits of all the things that I talked about, but it's in one package with less configuration, which again, it's kind of like Next.js. So I've seen a lot of people start to trend in this way. For more opinionated programmers, they tend to like to have their own linting rules or formatting rules. But if you don't really care, which a lot of people don't, this might be a better option for you. So Zeit, who makes Next.js, they're using this. A lot of other big companies are using this. And I feel like the industry is kind of trending in this way. So you have a couple different options for how you want to set up your linting or your formatting, but really it just helps you save time and energy and ensure that the code that you output is really readable and easy to review on PRs across your team or just for your own projects. So now that you have Next.js up and running, we can move on to the next module and start cranking out some code. Cheers.